folks, Ariel over here at Finest, where today we are making a pumpkin cheesecake. This is my variation of a recipe that I will include at the end. So I guess I could do this right now. You're the kind of person that wants a actual recipe. This is what I'm generally going off of. As normal, that's general. I don't remember where this recipe originally came from either. It calls for crushing up vanilla wafers as a crumb crust. I don't have any of those ready to come out, but I do have a couple packs of graham crackers. That's also something I don't normally buy, but we have a lot of friends who know that our household will pretty much use up anything that would otherwise get thrown away. So every time somebody's like going out of town for a while or something along those lines, they tend to give us whatever needs using because they assume that will keep it from going to waste. So anyway, somebody gave me these graham crackers. So I think I'm going to make the crust a little thicker. It calls for 2 cups. If I'm going to open this pack, I want to use them all. So that's going to make a plenty thick crust. But as you can see, I'm just crushing the crackers of whatever kind you use. You could make some other kind of crust if you want. But this is a recipe I don't make very often because though I don't eat a lot of dairy, and it doesn't make me feel spectacular when I do, I love cream cheese. So if I made this regularly, I would eat all of it all the time. But we've got my brother and some other friends coming over tomorrow for a Thanksgiving meal, so we'll have lots of people to eat this up. So I've got those crushed in there, and I'm going to add a 1/2 cup of butter. You could melt this in a microwave if you're using something like that, or a little pan, but to keep myself from having extra dishes, I'm simply going to melt it right in here in my oven. So this is going to accomplish also preheating my oven, but I'm just going to set this in here just until that butter starts to melt. So that's going to be the crust. Butter papers make excellent fire starter, as well as they're great for wiping into the corners of a pan if you need to grease a pan. So while that's doing that, we're going to get this going. Going to 4 packs of cream cheese. This is a rich cheesecake for sure, and another reason I kind of save it for special occasions, though I'm certainly not partial to it only being something like Thanksgiving, but this is a great excuse to make this. So 4 packages of cream cheese. If you're in a different part of the world, a standard package in my area is 8 ounces. So that would be 8 times 4 is 32. That'd be 32 ounces of cream cheese. Or if you get to make your own, also any paper stuff like this either goes in the compost or into the fire. Kind of depends on the time of the year. So, I don't know if you guys have anything fun planned for Thanksgiving. This is actually kind of rare in recent history that I'm doing a meal on the day, but we like to do. It's been actually a while. I've been so busy with projects here and so overwhelmed with everything all summer, but I used to regularly all through the year have lots and lots of friends over for big meals, and that's something I hope to be able to sometime in the next few years get back to doing more of, because that's just something I enjoy. So we're going to just dump these. You could hand mix this. I have this ancient KitchenAid mixer. It's older than me. It was my mother's, and she upgraded to a larger one. I was able to inherit this one, and it just saves a little energy on hand whipping everything. So clean off those wrappers. Be sure we're not wasting any of that. And we're just going to get all this in our mixing bowl. Like to give that a little whip to get it kind of just started getting fluffy. And I actually had that cream cheese sitting out on the counter for just an hour or so to get kind of up to room temperature, which is much warmer than outside is for sure. Meanwhile, outside the window and past the bird feeder, our current closest neighbors, the horses, 2 different batches of them, are having a chat across the fence while the snowflakes drift down slowly. So that's just our cream cheese in there. We are going to add sugar. Recipe calls for 1.25 cups. I find that plenty sweet. This is a 1/2 cup measuring cup. So I'm just going to do a cup. I find that usually seems to be sufficient. And especially with that oven on, it gets warm in here. So let's take a peek. Our butter pat in there's almost all melted. We'll let it sit in the warmth for another second. So now we're going to gently just cream that sugar into the cream cheese. This is where having a mixer saves a lot of hand eating for sure. If you ever get a chance to pick up a good old one like this that somebody doesn't want anymore, I do recommend going for that. I do a lot of things by hand, but the few minutes I use this for things, pretty handy. And I got the old attachments for the front so you can like grate things and shred things, and we dehydrated a bunch of carrots this fall and ran through the shredder. You can shred 50 pounds of carrots pretty quickly. Okay, that's getting the sugar and cream cheese creamed together there. That's a good start. Let's get the rest of our ingredients in here. So we're going to add 1/4 cup of whipping cream. This would otherwise be known as heavy cream, pure cream. And I just don't feel like messing up another measuring thing. So that's a 1/2 cup, and I'm going to just fill it half of the way. Call that 1/4 cup. That's going to make this a little bit fluffier. Then we've got our different seasonings. Salt, about 1/4 teaspoon, so that's a very little amount. That's some pink Himalayan salt that somebody gave me. Usually I use my Redmond Real. The recipe you'll see calls for 1/2 teaspoon each of nutmeg, ginger, cinnamon, and cloves, and that is normally what I do because I usually only buy those spices individually. But somebody gave me some pumpkin pie spice, which is just those things already mixed. And so I'm going to, instead of doing 1/2 teaspoon each, do 2 teaspoons total because that's already mixed. But like I said, I don't normally buy them all in, mixed together because I do use them individually for various other things. We're going to add a little bit of vanilla extract. This is a homemade bottle I made. See, what's it going on 5 years ago? I have a more recent bottle in the cupboard that is brewing. You can, the smell coming off that is wonderful. You can go look up the video how to make your own vanilla extract. Anyway, we're doing about 1/4 teaspoon. I like to go a little heavier than that. So that's probably closer to 1/2 because I like the vanilla flavor and I've got plenty of it. That's, like I said, been lasting me for 5 years, so that'll probably go another 2 or so at least before I need to dip into the next batch. So we've got our vanilla, salt, nutmeg, ginger, cinnamon, and cloves, and we are going to mix those in. So our little pat of butter is almost the whole way melted in there. Down to just a little nubbin. But that is fine. We are going to mix all that melty butter into our crust crumbs And this crust doesn't need pre-baked or anything. I'm just kind of making the cracker crumbs moist with the butter, and then gonna pack it into the bottom of the pan. And you could have crumpled your crackers up smaller than I did, and more precisely fine if you wanted. I find that texture gets so nice and soft underneath this cheesecake anyway that it doesn't matter. So I'm just gonna kind of smooth that all out. Call that our crust. That is quite easy. So back to our cheesecake. The calls for a little bit of flour, about 3 tablespoons of flour. What I'm using here is a coconut flour. Usually if I use flour, I grind my own fresh whole wheat, and it hardly seems worth pulling out the grain mill for that. And I have some of this coconut flour that I use occasionally for other things. So do that. It's just to help it set up just a little bit thicker. And then also to help it set up, you'll notice if you're looking at the written recipe, it calls for 4 eggs and then 2 egg yolks. I just have never liked the idea of having the extra egg white around to deal with. So instead of that, what I've done for a long time now when I made this is I just do 5 whole eggs. Maybe there's a minuscule difference in something with the texture or whatever. I find it comes out very delicious and edible regardless. So that's what I do, is just 5 whole eggs. I saw somebody comment on one of the cooking videos not too long ago that they're going to quit watching because I never give exact recipes, and that's, and all I do is talk about the ingredients and nutrition, and that's just, if there's not precise recipes, this is useless. And it's like, okay, well, go find precise recipes. I don't call them recipe videos. I call them cooking videos. This is how I cook, and I think how many people who are proficient with cooking cook. You know what you can substitute. You can do things more or less the way you like them, which I think is one of the most awesome things about doing your own cooking. You can make things exactly the way you want. And so that's what I'm doing here, is showing how I cook, and bake sometimes. These are not precise recipes because that is not how I do anything. So this is getting, of course, a lot softer now that we've added various wet ingredients in there. So you got to be a little careful if you are using a mixer like this to turn it on slowly so you don't. That wasn't what I meant to do. Don't slop it all over your countertop. Now, that's pretty much our cream cheesy part. We need the pumpkin part. Most pumpkin in a can, which this is actually from some kind of squash. If you are baking your own squash, or even if you have some left over, or sweet potatoes, they work equally well. They taste almost interchangeable as far as I can tell. If you have some left from a Thanksgiving dinner and you want to make this after Thanksgiving, be something to do with it. I roast whole squashes at various times through the year. I just wasn't doing one right now, and sometimes if I have extra squash, I'll put it in the freezer, and that would work great for this, but we've eaten up all that I had. So I just went the lazy route and got a can of pumpkin. This would be about a cup of pumpkin, but pumpkins are something I wish we could grow here. They have a much longer growing season, usually somewhere like 160-ish days to maturity. Not specifically for like jack-o'-lantern pumpkins, but for all the butternuts and acorns, all the different squashes I love to use in cooking. And we, as you probably know, do not tend to have 160 days of a growing season without a frost. Often we only have 14 days or so at a time. But if you can grow squashes, they're a wonderful food because they store so well. You don't even have to can them or freeze them or dry them or anything. You just set the hardened squash somewhere and they keep for often a year. Okay, I just want to make sure I got everything in there. We got our crust, cream cheese, sugar, pumpkin, whipping cream, flour, spices, salt, vanilla, Yep, that is it. And you'll probably notice also if you're looking at that recipe card, there's a recipe for a topping to put on top of this. It's like a whipped cream with pecans and stuff in it. I haven't done that in years. I just kind of like the plain cheesecake, but it does look really pretty and tastes very yummy if you care to make that kind of topping and put on top. I'm not going to be doing that here because it's not usually what I do, but it's still on that recipe card from wherever that recipe was originally copied from. So, now that's everything in there. Now we're going to let this just mix for a minute at a higher speed to get thoroughly mixed. I'm going to pour it in here. This is going to go in the oven. This oven heats up so fast I actually turned it off in between there because it was plenty hot. So we've got our pumpkin filling here. Move that out of the way. I like to just clean my beater bars off here so that we're not wasting any of that. We're going to pour this into our crust. Our pan's still a little hot. So I'm just going to kind of gently pour this back and forth so I'm not making dents into my crust layer. And it's pretty much runny enough that it will spread out pretty good and evenly without a lot of help. If I'm careful, I don't do that. But you can smooth it just a bit into the corners, and the rest of that will smooth itself out as it is in the oven. So now this is going to go in the oven at 325 for, it says 35 to 40 minutes. I always do the low end first to be sure something's not overbaked. So we're going to set the timer for 35 minutes and check on it then. A little thermometer inside the oven does say 325. These gas ovens aren't quite as precise as most of you probably have if you're working with an electric oven. And 35 minutes on the timer. Check back in then. So our timer went off. In my experience, this almost always takes longer, and it does. I opened it and I can see, let me see if I can show that to the camera. So when you look in here, you can see how it's kind of puffing up. You can also see how there's a bit of a jiggle in the center. That is not even worth checking on if it's done yet. That needs to go at least 10 more minutes. Okay, so we're checking on this now. Oh, you see that? If the camera shows it, see how the surface is cracked? That's what you want to see. See how I'm still getting a jiggle in there? I'm actually going to let that go like another 5 minutes. But that is getting really close. Okay, so we are closer to 50 minutes. Everyone's oven is different, but I've found this is often more what mine takes. See how we've got now wide open cracks on the surface. It's much firmer. It's still soft. I'm touching it very gently, but it kind of rebounds right away. The whole thing's not jiggly. Now this is still going to fall somewhat back down to level instead of looking puffy like it is now as it cools, but this is done. Fresh out of the oven.
We hope you enjoyed it.
Come back next time for more adventures.
Thanks for watching.